December 23, I opened my blood test result. Total cholesterol 8, the highest it had ever been. I'd been on statins for 9 years. Not slightly elevated, higher than my very first reading, before I'd ever taken a single pill. And when I finally laid all 13 years of NHS results out in order, I found something in the pattern that nobody had ever shown me. Jesse Inship, biochemist, wrote Glucose Revolution, points to the same mechanism. I'll get to that, but I want to show you my numbers first. I'm Neil. I've got 13 years of NHS blood tests in a folder on my desk, and I've been off all medication since February 2024. What I found when I laid those results out is that the cholesterol numbers on its own doesn't tell you anything. It's the ratio, the relationship between your total cholesterol and your HDL. That tells you where your cardiovascular risk actually sits. Mine worsened 32% across 9 years on dual medication. That's not a rounding error, that's a pattern. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what those panels look like, why the ratio matters more than the headline number, and what happened in the 14 months after I stopped the medication. 3 things. First, what 9 years of NHS lipid panels actually showed, the numbers the GP was watching, and the number that was quietly moving in the wrong direction. Second, the mechanism that explains why this can happen and why your cholesterol is controlled can mean something very different to your cardiovascular risk is reducing. And then what changed after I stopped? Not what I expected. So let me put some context around the opening number, because 8 in December 23 didn't come out of nowhere. It came at the end of something. And to understand what that something was, you have to go back to 2012, April 2012. Blood test, total cholesterol 7.5. GP flags it. That's in my evidence log. Abnormal. Need to speak to doctor. So we spoke. Statin started. Atorvastatin first. Then we added azestamide a few years later to help with absorption. Dual therapy, belt and braces, job done. Except not quite, because here's the thing I didn't know to ask at the time. I was watching the wrong number. Not through any failure of the GP, just through how the system works. The headline number, total cholesterol, was the thing that went on the printout with a little flag next to it. And the medication was sort of keeping it in the conversation. But sort of keeping it in the conversation turned out to mean 7.5 in 2012. Then very roughly stable across the middle years while I was on medication. 7.3 in 2020. Then 8 in December 2023. I'd been medicated for 9 years, taking 2 cholesterol drugs daily, and the number had gone up. Not massively, but up. I started the medication at 7.5. I ended in 2023 at 8. And I found this out, not in a GP surgery. I found it out at my desk late one evening, feeding all 13 years of NHS blood test results into a spreadsheet and asking AI to look for patterns, because I hadn't been shown them side by side before. Each test existed in isolation. One appointment, one printout, one within range for your medication, and off you go. Nobody ever laid them out in order and said, right, here's the trajectory, here's the direction of travel. So I did it myself. And what came back stopped me. Let me give you the actual numbers across those 9 years. Not the ones on the prescription, the ones on the ratios. April 2012, first reading, 7.5. Cholesterol to HDL ratio, 4.7. That ratio put me outside ideal, but not alarming. Medication starts. December 2016, 4 years in, cholesterol 5.3. Now that's where the story sounds good. Medication working, numbers coming down, job's done. Except the cholesterol HDL ratio that month, 4.2. Still not terrible. Then something shifts. July 2020, total cholesterol 7.4. Higher than my starting point before medication. And that cross-referenced with the 2020 panel in my medical history. And that's not a blip. August 2020, 7.3, same territory. December 23, 8. Ratio 6.2. Let me sit with that second number for a moment. 6.2, when I started medication in 2012, the ratio was 4.7. 9 years later on dual medication, the ratio was 6.2. That's a 32% deterioration in cardiovascular risk marker while I was actively medicated. The LDL, the bad cholesterol number the prescription was optimized around, had moved. Yes, it was being partially addressed, but the ratio, the relationship between total cholesterol and HDL, the number that actually tells you about cardiovascular risk trajectory, that had quietly worsened across the entire 9 years that I'd been taking medication. Now I want to be careful here. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you what this means for your situation. What I can tell you is what it meant for mine and what the data showed when I finally looked at all of it together rather than one result at a time. The pattern that came out of the spreadsheet was this. The number being managed wasn't the number that mattered most for risk, and the number that mattered most for risk was moving in the wrong direction the whole time. Now here's where Jesse Enchett, biochemist, Glucose Revolution, puts it clearly. The research suggests it's not total LDL cholesterol, but the triglycerides to HDL ratio and C-reactive protein that are better predictors of heart disease risk. And around 9 out of 10 GPs still lead with total LDL as the primary metric. That's not a failing, it's what the system is built around. But it does mean that your cholesterol is controlled and your cardiovascular risk is reducing can be two very different statements, even when they feel like they should mean the same thing. Think of LDL like checking the cargo being delivered around your bloodstream. The ApoB protein, the address label on each particle, is what tells the arterial wall where to dock. More particles with that label, more docking, more furring. Standard LDL measures the cargo. The ratio measures something close to the delivery system. And I was tracking the cargo while the delivery system was getting busier. My ratio went from 4.7 to 6.2 across 9 years. The cargo metric looked partially controlled. The delivery system metric was deteriorating. And that's the pattern that I'd missed. That's what 13 years of individual printouts, each read in isolation, didn't show me. What the spreadsheet showed me when I put them all side by side. 13 years of NHS blood tests, the actual numbers, the GP conversations, what changed and what didn't. If you want to follow someone who documents this properly rather than just talks about it, that's what this channel is. Subscribe if that's useful to you. So when did it click? Not a GP appointment, not from a printed result. It was an evening in late 23, me at my desk with a spreadsheet, feeding in every NHS lipid panel I could find, 2012, 2016, 2020, 2023, and asking the question I'd never thought to ask, is this number better or worse than when I started? Not is this number within range, not is the medication doing something, is this number better or worse than where I started? And the answer for the ratio was worse, measurably, consistently worse. That was the moment, nothing dramatic, no GP in the room, just me, a screen, and a column of numbers going in the wrong direction. February 2024, I stopped the statins and ezetimibe. I want to be very clear about this happened. I'm not suggesting that anyone does this with medical oversight, but I did stop without telling my doctor. The decision came because I'd been losing weight consistently since Boxing Day 2023. I'd done a 17-day water-only fast in the preceding weeks and then a 10-day water fast. And I felt genuinely, measurably different to how I felt for years. My body was doing something different. So I decided to stop taking the pills. 1 month later, March 2024, first blood test off statins. Total cholesterol was 7, down from 8 3 months earlier, on no medication. And then he said, and remember this clearly, your lipids are better now than when you were on medication. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Now, the total cholesterol number was still high by any standard. 7 is not where you want to be. But the ratio had shifted, 6.2 to 5.4 in a month of not taking pills and 3 months of eating properly and fasting on a regular basis. And the direction, for the first time in 9 years, was actually going somewhere useful. By April 2025, 14 months off statins, the data point, my LDL was 3.8, down 32% from where it sat on the medication, and my ratio was 4.7, back to where it was in 2012, when I first started. HDL, 1.5, up from 1.3. The comparison that landed for me, 9 years of dual medication, cholesterol worsened, 6.7%. 14 months off medication with fasting and non-UPF eating, LDL improved 32%. That's not a marginal difference. The velocity of improvement off medication was roughly 9 times faster than the decline on it. Why? My best understanding, and this N equals 1, it's one person, it's my data, it's not a clinical trial, is that the medication was managing a downstream symptom while the upstream problem stayed in place. Insulin resistance, inflammation, the wrong food at the wrong time. When I fixed the inputs, fasting, real food, no UPFs, the system started correcting itself in ways the statins hadn't managed in nearly a decade. What I'd do differently if I was starting this process again, I'd ask for the ratio at every blood test, not just the headline number, the cholesterol HDL ratio, the triglycerides. Those two numbers together tell a much more complete story about cardiovascular risk trajectory than total cholesterol alone. I never asked for them. They were on the printout, I just wasn't looking at them, and nobody flagged them specifically. One question to your GP at your next appointment. What's my cholesterol to HDL ratio, and has it moved since my last test? That's it. One question. If you're on cholesterol medication and your annual review just confirms within range, it might be worth looking at whether within range means the ratio is improving or just a headline number. I'm not saying the medication isn't doing something. I'm saying the ratio is the more useful signal, and I wish someone had shown me mine 9 years earlier. If you can access your NHS test history through the app or your GP surgery, lay the last 3 or 4 lipid panels side by side. Look at the ratio column, not just total cholesterol, the ratio. See which direction it's been moving. Here's the thing that's worth knowing before any of this becomes a conversation with a GP. The cardiovascular risk pattern doesn't appear overnight. It builds across years. The ratio I'm describing, the relationship between your total cholesterol and your HDL, can be quietly worsening while your headline number looks managed, or even while your headline number looks fine. The mechanism behind this is the same one running in most adults through their 40s and 50s. Insulin resistance gradually affecting how the body handles lipids, independent of what any pill is doing to one marker in isolation. If your energy has been flat for no obvious reason, if you've been told your cholesterol is borderline and put on a watch and wait, if you're just starting to ask these questions before a diagnosis exists, the ratio is worth understanding now, not as a diagnosis, just as a more complete picture of what the numbers actually mean. I've put together a free tracker, a simple one-page thing you can use to log your own NHS lipid panels across multiple tests and see the ratio trend for yourself. Same thing I wish I'd had in 2012. It's in the description below. This is educational content. It's not medical advice. Please don't stop or change any medication without speaking to your GP first. All my biomarker changes, every number I've cited today, are in my NHS records, referenced in my evidence log, and I bring the latest results to every GP appointment I have. Next Monday, a different pattern, same detective process. If you found this useful, subscribe. New videos Monday, Wednesday and Friday.